It's been a while, but here we are, back to reviewing comic book movies. Was it worth the wait? Find out when Johnny Torch reviews Wonder Woman 1984. Well, welcome in everyone to the show. We are doing a spoiler review today of Wonder Woman 1984. Some of you may have seen it on HBO Max. It's been available there since Christmas Day, I believe. I waited the extra week so I was able to go see it in theaters. And I will say, if you have the option open to you, and of course not everyone does, go see it in theaters. I think, at least for me, it was worth going to see in theaters if you're going to watch this movie at all, which we'll get into in a moment. Before we begin, like, share, subscribe, do all those wonderful things. And please check out The Adventures of Bullets, Bourbon, Private Eye, the action-adventure series, comic book saga created by yours truly. You'll find the link in the description below. But I don't want to waste too much time here today. I have a habit of getting verbose and droning on and on about these topics, but we're going to try to stay pretty focused here and talk about it. Before we get into the spoilers, of course, like I always like to do, I'm going to give a very brief encapsulation of my views that are spoiler-free. So if you ventured into this spoiler video not really wanting spoilers, I'll give you a couple sentences just to sum it up. I liked the movie. I don't think it is terrible. I don't think it's a disaster, but it is flawed. I can see why some people don't like some of the things, such as tone changes from the first movie. It's fairly overlong. That was one of my biggest problems with the film, is I think, particularly since this film has been on the shelf for, I think, at least 2 years, I think in all that time, a judicious editor would have been a big benefit to the film. And if they could have seriously whacked at least 20 minutes out of the film, possibly more, and streamlined it. It's kind of a touchy thing, I suppose, because some films, it feels like they cut it to the bone, and you could have let a moment breathe, you could have fleshed out something else. I think this film had the opposite problem. I think they really needed to tighten it up. We didn't need to see going from point A to point B, taking 15 minutes each time. It needed to be tightened up. The action scenes were very good. I enjoyed them a lot. I think Gal Gadot really upped her game for this film. I watched the original Wonder Woman in preparation for going to see Wonder Woman 84. And, there were a few scenes I was like, she's not really very good. I know that's been sort of an albatross around her neck for quite a while, since the beginning, that she's really not that talented. But I think she upped her game in this one. I think that I'd have to give her some serious points for, there was quite a number of emotional scenes that I think she handled very well. The rest of the cast was very good. I liked Kristen Wiig as Barbara Minerva / Cheetah, and of course, Chris Pine is always a delight as Steve Trevor in this case. He's always a very, he seems a very warm and, he sort of gives the impression of someone who doesn't have a big opinion of himself in this film, kind of in contrast to like his playing Captain Kirk. In other words, a bit different. So, yeah, I would recommend it, and that's if you're entirely interested in this kind of franchise. But I went with my family, and the reviews sort of ranged from mixed to poor. So be prepared for that. I'm probably the most generous of the viewing party that went to see it. Okay, so with that out of the way, the first 5 minutes or so spoiler-free, now we get into the spoilers, and we will try to talk at length with some detail about the film. So, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. You have no one to blame but yourself from this point on. I think most people probably have already seen the movie at this point. I don't think there really is. If you can watch it at home, there's really no excuse for you not to have seen it by now. Of course, some of us, like myself, waited to see it in a movie theater. Like I said, there is something to be said about the spectacle. There's a lot of stuff that I think probably wouldn't be as impressive on the small screen. We'll talk about that for a second. Wonder Woman soaring through the air and the clouds, and we had the fireworks scene and some of the action scenes as well, which I thought were done very well. But that was kind of the I think that's sort of the ambience that you lose when you watch it at home. So that's why I say if you have the opportunity, check it out in theaters. All right, so let's see here. It's been a couple of years that this film has been on the shelf. Patty Jenkins, of course, returning to direct. The principal stars, of course, Gal Gadot and Chris Pine coming back. And the way I described it, if I was to describe it, would be that the first film, obviously, Patty Jenkins had Superman the movie in mind as a form of reference. You know, in this film, it seems like she took an amalgamation of Superman 2, 3, and 4 as her inspiration, and it never really coalesces into a solid product, I don't believe. But it's one of those things where it's like the sum of its parts are greater than it as a whole. I think that there are certain scenes that a lot of people say, well, this is not a movie I'd go back to. I probably won't watch this again. In my case, there are a lot of scenes that resonated, whether it be an action scene, an emotional scene, that I think are worth revisiting and are very well done, performed, acted. They were very good. But the story as a whole, it seemed, couldn't sustain the weight of the better parts. To start off, I would just say, if the question is, what is the better movie, Wonder Woman or Wonder Woman 84, I think there are some better scenes in 84, quite honestly, that really speak to the character. But as a whole, as a product, probably Wonder Woman, the first movie, is the better product. It's tighter. There's a concise story. There's very little meandering. It's a long movie as well, the original Wonder Woman, but it feels like it has purpose in every scene. Not quite so this film. This film didn't have the benefit of Zack Snyder writing it, but it had the benefit of his being a producer. If you don't know my feelings on Zack Snyder, I'm not particularly pleased with his forays into DC Comics in the feature film division. And a lot of people are complaining as well that this film takes liberties with established canon in the Zack Snyderverse. I am okay with that. Let me say that right off the bat. I don't have a problem with them making this sort of a soft reboot. Now, it's very difficult to see how you can reconcile this film with the other films in the canon. When we were introduced to Wonder Woman, she was out of action for 100 years, and she, wasn't seen by the public. And they try to keep up that pretense at the beginning of this film with her, taking out cameras and seeing to it that she's not seen by the general public. And of course, there not being the internet and such as it was back in the 80s, there was really no way to photograph her easily in action. So there really was no reason for this film to be set in 84. Also, they sort of harken back to the nuclear Cold War era, and to be honest with you, they really didn't need that. They could have done anything else. So it was kind of superfluous that they had to set this in the 80s. This could have easily been set in the present day, and when Steve Trevor comes back, he is still a fish out of water, because that was sort of the premise of this. As I saw from the trailers, I kind of knew that that was going to be probably the hokiest part, that we're now playing Steve as the fish out of water when Diana was originally. The difference is, it seems like it's an obvious attempt at humor in Steve's case. When it was Diana in the first movie, it was more natural. She'd never seen a baby before. She'd never seen ice cream and tried it. In this case, it's more jokes like, wow, this is a stairway that moves. What will they think of next? And, this is a trash can. It was sort of more as an attempt at humor. And I think that it's things like that that kind of slowed the pace down as well. Talking about the the film proper, of course, the plot is Max Lord, who, of course, is also a villain in the comics. He's sort of a television personality who's trying to build up his oil empire through infomercials and so on and so forth. And he comes across the wishing stone, which it's very vague. They don't really go into too much detail about this. And Cheetah is involved because Barbara Minerva is sort of a cataloger, I suppose, of these artifacts, and eventually he gets his hand on it, and he sort of becomes the genie of the lamp by wishing to become the genie. And in that case, he can give out wishes, and whenever he gives out a wish, he ends up getting something in return. So that's the overall plot. Of course, Wonder Woman sort of takes the off chance that the stone would work, and she's the only one that non-verbally wishes for something, and she gets Steve Trevor back. He comes back in somebody else's body, which, again, was kind of a strange choice. Meanwhile, Barbara makes a wish that she become like Diana, which unknowingly to her gives her the powers of Wonder Woman. Of course, something is taken from the person. In Barbara's case, it's her humanity, and in Wonder Woman's case, it's her powers, which steadily decline throughout the picture. I like using that term. That's a Siskel and Ebert term, the picture. When you're talking about a movie, you don't call it a film or a movie, the picture. Anyway, let's take it a little one character at a time here. I think one of the more positive things was the Cheetah. I liked the buildup of the character. You know, Kristen Wiig starting off as a very nerdy, sort of, mousy character or whatever, and then through the wish ends up starting to become like the ugly duckling, the swan, and then eventually, as she becomes more cold and hardened, she makes another wish that makes her into the Cheetah. And the interesting thing is she gets two wishes. Now, I have a feeling the reason why she gets the second wish is because the first wish was on the stone and the second wish was on Max. So a lot of people try to point out the plot holes, and there are some plot holes in this film. I'm kind of jumping around, but a lot of people want to point out the plot holes. To me, if you can explain a plot hole to yourself within the first 3 minutes of hearing it, it's not a plot hole. They just made you think for yourself. A more difficult one was Steve learning how to pilot, a modern jet after he'd just known how to fly biplanes. It's one of these things that you have to go with it. And that really isn't something that I get hung up on. That's like, for instance, like let's say Star Trek 4. Let's take this one. Mr. Sulu can fly to him an antique plane with maybe just 10 minutes of instruction by another pilot. It's kind of the same thing here. They could have just used a throwaway line and it would have made it a lot more palatable for people to accept something like that, such as Diana saying, I have some familiarity with planes. I mean, she had been on the Earth for 70 years at that point. She could have just said, yeah, pull that lever or something like that. That's what I mean. It's basically throwaway lines or something that the audience can hold on to. It's really not a huge issue. Some people make them bigger issues than they really are. That really didn't bother me. So, yeah, the Cheetah, the final battle with the Cheetah is where we finally see her in all her glory. Such as it is, it was kind of dark, kind of difficult to see. I thought the end fight was pretty good. A lot of people also are criticizing the film for the defensive posture of Wonder Woman. And this is something I wanted to talk about early as well, because that is something that I applaud the film for. Now, in Wonder Woman, the original film, Wonder Woman is more a warrior, an executioner, a god killer. They literally christen her a god killer. There are two different kinds of interpretations of the character. The modern interpretation is to take her back to Greek mythology, where all Amazons had a sword and a bow and arrow or whatever, and they would just kill other gods and demigods and minotaurs and whatever. Then there is the classic interpretation of Wonder Woman, which goes back more so represented in the Linda Carter series, where she's an ambassador of peace. She's supposed to try to broker peace in man's world, quote unquote. And she doesn't use war weapons. You've heard me criticize this in the past, especially if you watched my very popular Wonder Woman television series retrospective. This is the incarnation of that I would like Wonder Woman to be. She doesn't charge into a scene trying to kill anybody or seriously maim anybody. She is coming in from a defensive posture where she's trying to protect the innocent, and therefore her attacks are not lethal. That is something I'm always very strong proponent of. So they did capture that. Now, a lot of people, like I said, that went to see the first picture probably didn't anticipate that Patty Jenkins would go in the other direction and completely do a 180 to the more classic interpretation of Wonder Woman. I found that very rewarding. I particularly like that version of Wonder Woman. And of course, because Wonder Woman is set in 84, it makes more sense than to do that in a picture set in World War I, where, you know, literally during a war, there have to be casualties. So I was happy with that. The action scenes were very good. I liked the battle with Cheetah in the White House. I liked the car chase, of course, very Indiana Jones-ish. And I think it came across very well. Now, the problem is there was a long dearth of action in the first act, let's say. And, you know, I try to rationalize this from Patty Jenkins' point of view, because like I said, she is taking Superman 2, 3, and 4, basically. Superman 2, she had that long period where there is no heroics, there's no action, it's a love story. That's basically all it is for the first act. Diana gets Steve back, and then they're just a happy couple, and the world is their oyster, and that's fine for what it is. But unlike Superman 2, where you had the villains able to carry the story while Superman was having this love affair with Lois Lane, you don't get that in this film. Cheetah is not really, well, she's not even Cheetah yet. She's still kind of a good person discovering herself. And Max Lord is also sort of he's on the path to being a villain in the beginning. He's really not a villain. He's just taking opportunities. And again, this is sort of Superman 3 in this sense, where we don't quite have a villain. I think you could cast either Barbara or Max as sort of the Gus Gorman of the film, because both of them don't start out evil. They're just sort of opportunists. They're trying to do something to better themselves without really having any consideration for the fallout. So that was, and I think the beginning scene there with Wonder Woman, that was very much Superman 3. You know, how the opening scene of Superman 3, where there's like all kinds of, you know, nutsy cuckoo stuff going on, and then Superman has to save a guy from drowning in his car. That's kind of what I think she was going for in that opening scene there with Wonder Woman. It's basically like a robbery attempt that, just like a comedy of errors until Wonder Woman shows up and, you know, saves the day. Of course, like I said, the tone might put some off. That didn't bother me quite so much, but again, that you know, you have to have had an appreciation, like some of us do anyway, of the Lester part of the the Superman film catalog. Okay, so we got the introduction to the Invisible Jet. I like that a lot. It was kind of odd the way they did it, where she just sort of manifests this power once to turn the jet invisible, and that's it. I kind of don't like those kind of Deus Ex Machina solutions, because then you have people saying, well, why doesn't she turn this invisible? Why didn't she turn that invisible? Why doesn't she turn herself invisible? I think the reason is because it's a permanent solution to a problem. I don't think she can uninvisible something. So let's say she turns herself invisible. How is she going to turn herself uninvisible? I don't think that's a power that she has, or at least learned at that point in the film. But again, that was to me the most like romantic part of the film. I mean, you have Superman and Lois flying, and this was sort of the Diana and Steve on the magic carpet as if it was Aladdin. You know what I mean? This is kind of all you really needed, this scene. I didn't think there needed to be this long, protracted romance. But that is not really at fault. I think the biggest fault is taking too much time with Max Lord. I think part of the problem is we have to see him go from point A to point B step by step, and it takes far too long. This is something that I think also hindered, although to a lesser extent, X-Men Apocalypse, where the whole world has to go to heck, and we have to see that visually. But it kind of, there's only so much that you could watch of pandemonium and people running around and people being afraid. For contrast, like take Superman 2. We, of course, in a budget of whatever it was, 1981 or something, you couldn't really show too much. They just showed Zod and company trampling a small Midwestern town. And that's kind of what I mean. That's all you really need. You just needed to show some kind of crisis montage, and that's it. I think they went way overboard on that, and they tried to sort of compound the calamity that was going on in the world, 5, 6, 10 times fold, and it was a little too much. And as I said, having Max, once we established that he could fulfill wishes, we really didn't need to see him do it like 70 or 80 times the way he did. We just needed to see him do it once. We needed to see him do it twice. And then after that, we get the idea. And then he does his big, villain thing at the end where he's trying to get the wishes of everybody in the whole globe. I think that probably would have been the place to save a lot of time and try to make this film a lot more concise. Again, I'm skipping all over the place, but let's talk about the end. A lot of people also had problems with, would everybody recant their wish, which is what Wonder Woman basically says, and is the only way that this is going to stop. Now, in the comics, I believe Wonder Woman killed Max Lord, but since, thankfully, we don't have that kind of Wonder Woman here, they already did that with Superman, actually, in Man of Steel. Otherwise, they probably would have had her do it had Zack Snyder been in charge. But, this film is a fantasy. That is something else that I think you have to understand. When you go into this film, this is sort of a different genre from even the first Wonder Woman film. This is a fantasy. This is not, this is an idealized situation. I don't really think it's something that's meant to be analyzed for its each and every point. You know what I'm trying to say? I've heard some people say, well, because Max had the lasso on him, that perhaps that was the way that Wonder Woman was sort of controlling all the people that were making wishes that they would recant, because she basically had them in her power. I don't know if that's what the filmmakers were going for, but that's a possibility. So it's kind of like you have to either go with the concept or you don't. A lot of people don't, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. If you want to have any kind of enjoyment with the film, though, I think you have to go into it on its own terms, that this is kind of where we're going. And I honestly like the concept. I like the concept because very few superhero films, because we've had that grim and gritty, it's got to be realistic, it's got to be grounded. Very few superhero films will go with this is what they call, I guess, a monkey's paw concept. I don't really even know what that comes from. I got to read up on that. But magic, something like that. Very few comic book films or properties at all would touch that, because it's too far out there for audiences. You usually have a plot to blow up the world or whatever the heck it is. You don't have a plot where it has to do with magic and it has to do with trying to convince the villain that what they're doing is wrong. It's I applaud them for trying to do something like that. It isn't as rewarding that way, though. I think that's probably the reason why it's not tried as often as it is. For instance, I typically criticize Spider-Man 2 for no big end battle. Spider-Man throws hands with Doc Ock a couple of minutes, and then it's like, well, Doc Ock, you got to do the right thing. And this is kind of what happens here. I mean, this could have very well been another way where Max becomes a huge monster or something, and Wonder Woman has to knock him out. They don't go for that here. They go for the emotional beats. They go for the end. I kind of figured that's the way it was going to go when he had a kid, Max. Now, there's only two reasons for the kid being there. One, the kid gets killed and he turns unrepentantly evil, or the kid survives and he sort of repents, which I kind of figured it was going to be the latter. And it was, I think, again, they could have trimmed some of that out. I did think it was kind of heartwarming, the resolution. I preferred that would be the way they ended, I suppose. But, yeah, there was no real, ramifications for what he did. He doesn't get punished in the film for doing everything he did. Again, it's one of those things where because he had the best of intentions at first, it ends up that he really isn't punished for his crimes. But at the end of the day, I suppose nothing was really done. Nothing went wrong. I mean, when you look at it, even Cheetah goes back to normal. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's another criticism of the film, really. A lot of people are like, well, it kind of just ends where it began, right? I mean, nothing really, there was no lasting element there added to the Wonder Woman mythos. Although, having Diana wrestle with the loss of Steve and stuff, that I actually enjoyed that. I thought that was a good concept as well. You had, like I said, a very emotional scene between Steve and Diana, and she basically has to renounce the wish, and that stuff worked. That's what I mean. There are some scenes that just really work, and if you will allow yourself to sort of bypass some of the other stuff that didn't work, the stuff that did work very well. The battle in the White House, I thought, worked really well. Would have liked to see some more of the Cheetah. Obviously, it doesn't really, it's kind of she was always intended to be sort of a final boss battle. I don't think they were going to have her walking around as Cheetah for very much. But, so let's see. Let me also talk about the opening scene. Now, I remember complaining in the original Wonder Woman that they didn't do the contest, which is, or has always been, a big part of the Wonder Woman origin, where Diana disguises herself in order to take part in sort of the Olympic Games, so to speak, that would decide who would take Steve Trevor back to America. And they cut that out entirely from the original movie, which disappointed me, but they brought back some kind of semblance of the Amazon Games here, which I thought was pretty nice. And of course, we get the cameos of Hippolyta and Antiope. I'm never sure how to pronounce her name, which was nice. And again, it was baby Wonder Woman there, and and they taught her a valuable lesson, which of course comes back in the movie at some point. That was pretty cool. So that was pretty enjoyable. We had the armor, the I'm trying to remember what they called it. Astoria's armor, something like that. That didn't turn out to be as big a thing as I thought it was going to be, because I was like, oh, they're going to put her in that suit and so on and so forth. Nah, it really wasn't that big of an issue. I didn't have any problem with it. And of course, the after credits tag, that was a lot of fun, of course, where Linda Carter, the original Wonder Woman, has a cameo. That was a lot of fun. And I would like to think that that's going to build up to Wonder Woman 3. I don't know if they'll get her back to do something, of great consequence in Wonder Woman 3, but it would be great if they did, because I think that's kind of what Linda Carter is waiting for. I don't think she wants to do any kind of, it's sort of comparable to, I think, what they said Adam West they wanted to give Adam West a cameo in Batman '89, and he was like, "Look, I'm Batman. I'm not going to take a, you know, meaningless role as vegetable vendor number 3 in Gotham City." You know what I mean? You don't go down. You don't go down like that. So to have Linda Carter be like the original Amazon, that was something worthy of her. I'm sure in her mind it was worthy of her, and that's why she took that cameo. But like I said, if they could do something else with that character and with her playing it, that would be great. If they could do something like that in the third movie, which of course has been greenlit already. You've got the Wonder Woman 3, because Patty Jenkins had said at some point she wasn't sure she was going to come back for the third movie. I didn't see anything to stand in her way with that. I suppose it's pretty much all set to go there for a part 3. So let's see. I think we pretty much covered everything. I think another thing is the Max Lord comparisons to Donald Trump. I didn't really see any. I didn't see that being a huge factor. If that's what they were intending, they failed, because nothing about him really screamed Donald Trump to me anyway. So if they were trying to do something that was like a takeoff on him, it didn't work. Let's see. Also, trying to look at my list of notes here. Let's see. I think, a lot of people have criticized also if there's any misogyny in the film. I don't really think there was a huge issue about that. I mean, there was sort of this kind of underlying current there where, like, a lot of guys would be constantly giving, wolf whistles and cat calls. I thought that got a little tiresome. But for people who were like trying to compare this to Captain Marvel 2, which or trying to make this Captain Marvel 2, which I think a lot of people were kind of hoping so that they would have clickbait titles to add to their YouTube revenue. It really wasn't that bad, I don't think. I don't think this film, if it fails at any rate, was because of anything that was displaying misogyny or whatever. All right, so yeah, that about wraps it up. I think that'll about do it. As I said, if I'm going to give this a rating, I would probably have to say 4 stars out of 5. Yeah, 4 stars out of 5. That would be a B plus. Again, I liked it. I thought some of the parts were very good. I thought some of the acting was very good. I thought the action was pretty good. There was a lot of unnecessariness that could have just been streamlined, in my opinion. But, at the end of the day, I don't think this film was a failure. I don't think they fell on their face. I think, if anything, maybe, when they go for Wonder Woman 3 with a new, fresh set of eyes, maybe see if they could streamline it more, see if it could be somehow tied a little bit more to the DCEU. But no, not a failure by any stretch of the imagination. Perhaps a little underwhelming, but I think it still works. It still works for me anyway. All right, so there you have it, Wonder Woman 1984. Let me know what you think about the film in the comments below. Did we cover everything? Did we give this film a good shake? I think so. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and we'll read them in the next subsequent Torch News Roundup. And so, until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch, reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.